Happy Thursday. Welcome back to Tips Under 10 with Jenna Redfield, my weekly show where I talk to you guys for under 10 minutes about a specific topic. And today I'm really excited to talk about podcasting. If you didn't know, I have had a podcast for over 3 years. I started it in, I think February of 2017. It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. And so I thought today, not only have I worked on the podcast, I've also worked continuously for a podcast studio in town. So I have a really big background in podcasting. I know a lot about it. I'm going to go through 10 things to think about when thinking if you should start one. Obviously, I'll have a little bit of tips inside. So I'm going to try to do 1 minute for each topic. We'll see if this works, but let's just get started. So the first thing to think about is, are you passionate about podcasting? Do you like to listen to podcasts? Do you like to talk? Because if you don't like to talk, podcasting is not the right platform for you. You need to be extremely passionate about podcasting to continue doing it. I've seen a lot of people start podcasts and after like 3 episodes, they're like, yeah, this isn't for me. So knowing, and that's the thing though, is sometimes you don't know if you like it or not if you haven't tried it. The first thing I would definitely think about is if you haven't been a guest on somebody else's podcast, do that first, because you will know if you like the medium, if you like talking, if you like answering questions. You know, because part of being a podcast host is if you interview people, you have to ask questions. So just knowing if you like podcasting in general is a really good thing to think about before you even start one. Okay, so the next thing you have to think about is, what is the topic? Now, most podcasts have a topic. Sometimes it's business related, sometimes it's just personal or fun, but one of the things that people keep coming back for is specific niches, topics, and something like that. You know, if it's pop culture, whatever it is, making sure that it is consistent is so important. For me, it started off more as just like interviewing local businesses, and it kind of moved towards marketing and social media, and that has basically been the focus ever since. So starting to think about if you have a topic in mind, sticking with that and making sure you can also like branch out a little bit with some of the topics. Like some of the topics on here on my podcast aren't always about social media, but a lot of them have that overarching theme of social media marketing. So start to think about what the topic's going to be. Okay, so the next thing you have to think about is, are you going to be doing this by yourself? Are you going to be doing it with a co-host? Or are you going to have guests? Now, this is going to really impact how long the episodes are, how much time it's going to take to make them with editing. So starting to think about, are you going to do it by yourself or with a co-host? With a co-host, you kind of take over 2 halves. Maybe one of you guys does half the work and then the other does the half. Or if you just want to have guests like I do, you definitely have to start planning who you're going to have. It's a lot of process to even get them on the show. So starting to think about the time element of that as well. All right, the next thing you have to think about is the length of the episodes. Now, most of the times, podcasts are between 20 minutes and an hour, but it depends on sometimes they're 10 minutes, sometimes they're 4 hours, depending on what kind of podcast it is. I try to keep mine around 40 to 45 minutes. That's kind of my goal, because to me that's 2 20-minute car rides, which obviously right now during quarantine, we're not driving as much, but that's kind of how I picture podcasting, is kind of 2 20-minute car rides for an episode. So starting to think about, okay, how long do I want the podcast to be? Because that's going to really impact editing time and everything alongside that. The next part is really important as well. How often are you going to be posting? Now, the average podcast posts once a week on a specific date. I post Tuesdays. I used to post on Mondays, but it was a lot of work on Sundays to get ready for it. Once I moved to Tuesdays, it was great. I love having my podcast go live on Tuesdays. Also, starting to think about, are you going to be doing seasons? Are you going to be doing it where you do it continuously? I do continuously, and I haven't really taken a break very much. But sometimes people do like 10 episodes in the season. It goes out 10 weeks in a row, then you take a couple months off, then do another season. So that's something you can do, or you can do a one-off where it's just a mini series where it's maybe 10 episodes total, and that's the whole podcast. There's some, true crime ones like that where it's a limited series. That might be easier for you if you don't want to keep podcasting. So start to think about that as well. Okay, the time element and budget. This is really important, because one thing that a lot of people don't realize is podcasting takes a lot of time. It's not just recording the episode, it's planning the episode, talking to the guests, recording, then editing and promoting. So it's a lot of things. It takes me at least 3 to 4 hours a week to do the podcast. And that includes editing, promoting, and recording. So that's something to think about. I'm really, really down to a schedule when it comes to creating graphics, to creating the videos. A lot of it I do the day before. I then send it out on email. I post it on every single social platform. For me, a lot of it is promotion of it. And I also have a video podcast. So a lot of it is the video side that takes longer. So it's up to you. If you don't want video, it will take you less time. But, I'm also someone who doesn't really edit a lot of my episode. I really just add intro, outro. Sometimes I add a ad in the middle, but I don't really cut very much out unless it was a huge mistake. Some people literally edit everything in their episode. So it's up to you guys, depending on how much you want to edit your episode. Also, how much money are you willing to spend on this? That's going to really, really impact the equipment, which I'll talk about next, because if you have for example, when I started, I had zero budget. I used Squarespace, which I already had and was paying for to host, so that was free, and I paid $100 for a mic. That was it. I did not have any other expenses. I did everything myself. Over time, I've obviously invested a lot in the equipment and have much, much higher quality equipment, so it sounds way better. Plus, I now do it in person, except during quarantine, but usually I do it in person, so the sound is even better. To me, what I've learned over the years is sound quality is really important, because if it sounds terrible, no one's going to listen to it, no matter how good the content is. And I've learned that from Ian at Studio Americana. He actually runs a really awesome podcast studio in town. I work there sometimes part-time. So if you guys, when the quarantine's over or even now, talk to him. He's a really great resource for podcasting. But one of the things I recommend is, if you do start a podcast, make sure the audio quality is really good. And he's told me a lot about, having good microphones, having a mixer, which is really important. So I'll talk about all of that next. I'm actually going to make a TikTok. I'm really into TikTok right now, and I'm going to show you guys all the equipment I do. So I'm just going to insert my TikTok right here, and you guys can see kind of what I've purchased. So in all, I've spent over almost $1,000 on all my equipment, and that was a really big investment for me because I don't like to spend money on anything. I am very much a do-it-yourselfer, but when it came to the quality for the guests and for myself and just having all of this stuff now, I can use it forever, which is great. So I'm so glad I invested in all of this before quarantine, because now I can continue to do the podcasting. To me, marketing the podcast is just as important as the podcast itself. I put a lot of effort into the content I create, audiograms, which are those waveforms if I don't have video. Otherwise, using video on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and my email, everything. I try to promote the podcast episodes, because to me, putting as much effort into the promotion as recording and editing is going to grow your episodes a lot more than you just posting it and no one ever finds out about it because you don't talk about it. So that's a really big thing for me, is the social media marketing aspect. Number 9 is, what's the outcome going to be? So one of the things you have to think about is this just for fun? Is this for business? Is this going to try to help me grow my business? Starting to think about why you want a podcast and what you can do to track if it's actually working or not. Obviously, when you start, you're not going to get the numbers that you think you're going to get, especially because podcasting is a very competitive market right now. There's a lot of them launching. So knowing that, but even if you have small numbers, knowing that if somebody listens to your full episode, that's a really quality lead for you, because they really listen to you and are invested in your brand and what you're saying. So starting to think about what you actually want to track in terms of outcomes is really, really important with podcasting. For me, a lot of it is views on social, not just the downloads, because it's another way that people can see me on camera. That's the thing, is if you're doing video, if you're doing audio podcasts only, figuring out for you, how are you growing? How are you knowing what's a good number for you? Because that's the thing, is certain episodes of mine do really well compared to others. And I always try to think about, okay, well, why is that one doing better? Is it the guest? Is it the topic? One of my biggest things to make sure that you do is every episode, you have to have a really good title, because that's how people are going to decide if they're going to listen to that episode or not. That's something a lot of people are just, when I first started, I was just an interview with so-and-so, and half the time people are like, who is that? So I learned very quickly, you need to have it topic first and not person first, unless it's a really big name. So start to think about that. It's really important to know. So hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Tips Under 10. I'll talk to you guys soon.